Ooh, as I trip and fall and break my face in front of everyone. Yeah, exactly. All right. Thank you all. So I'm going to talk about when things go bad. I renamed it at the last moment to when logs go bad, which is totally unfair, and I'm maligning log lists, but it's mostly because I wanted to use this image, which made me laugh, which is a bad log list. So that's all that is. So who am I? I'm an engineering manager on Chrome's network security team, which means I do no real work, but I like to talk about a lot of things. So let me tell a quick story for you. Way back on June 18th, we sent this email out saying, hey, we've qualified some new logs for inclusion in Chrome's CT log list. And this is an utterly routine event for us, so much so that we don't send these emails anymore because they're not actually actionable for anybody. But so that was June 18th, and then the following Saturday, a couple days later, I got a text message from my product manager being like, hey, you should know about this GitHub issue, and also it was flagged to me on the Transparency Dev Slack, so thanks for that, telling me that a whole bunch of Android apps had broken, impacting tens of millions of users. And for most of these apps, as soon as you opened the app, it would immediately crash and return back to your home screen, which is not awesome and not at all expected because I'm updating Chrome's log list for Chrome. So if anything, I'm expecting to break Chrome. So let's take a step back and provide a little bit of background. Chrome publishes a log list in JSON format, which represents all the logs that Chrome recognizes for complying with our CT policy. This is mostly listed for certificate submitters, like Matthew earlier talking about Let's Encrypt, and how they choose what logs to submit to, so that you can assemble the set of SCTs you need so that things work in Chrome. It's also published so that monitors, people like Andrew, and those looking for misissued certificates know where they can find logs and go from there. It's pointedly not for the use of other user agents hoping to enforce CT. In my opinion, well-behaved user agents publish their own log lists. Apple, for instance, publishes their own log list. It is possible to rely on other user agents' log lists. Some folks, such as Android and Firefox and several others, sit downstream from Chrome's log list, but they've worked with us to make sure that they can do so safely. If you don't do that, you sort of do so at your own risk, as we'll see in this talk. So, what did we do? We recently made a change to our log list schema in order to support static CT API, and we announced that schema in October of 2024. But we announced the schema, and then nothing changed day to day for quite some time. Enter the AppMatis Certificate Transparency Library, which is an open source library available on GitHub, and it lets you enforce CT on your Android app. And this filled a really important niche for the community because up until Android 16, which just came out, there was no native support for CT enforcement on Android if you weren't running in a web browser in Chrome or similar. This library, however, is maintained, as all good open source projects are, by one person doing their best in their free time, and that's a tough place to be. But that means that it's quite difficult for them to maintain their own CT log list, and so they piggyback on Chrome. And in particular, every client that uses this library fetches Chrome's log list every time you open the app, which is, as a fun fact, hundreds of thousands of QPS continuously on Chrome's servers. The library also has very strict schema expectations and enforcement, and if anything changes in the log list that it doesn't expect, it will crash. So, predictably, it crashed. So if we go and look at that GitHub issue, we can see that someone pointed out that there was this empty logs array. And that the library was not expecting an empty logs array. And that's because that logs array only lists 6962 logs. And our big schema change was to add this tiled log array so that log operators could have tiled logs, i.e. static CT API logs as well. So how did we fix this? Within a couple hours of the incident, we rolled out a fake log a 6962 log for this new log operator. By the way, this new log operator is geomice, aka Filippo, so we can all blame Filippo for this whole incident. And so now we have this bogus placeholder log included in our log list. And actually, we've maintained this over time. So there's now IPNG is also a static CT API only operator. And they also get their own bogus log now. And that's a fine Band-Aid. But in my, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. For those who attended CATS in 2023, you may remember a different lightning talk by Roger talking about a library that crashed when there was a schema change in Chrome's log list. And indeed, it was exactly the same library. So obviously, we did not adequately address the issue at the time. So this talk is really about what we're doing about it now. So both of these sets of breakages came down to schema changes that were unexpected by downstream consumers of the log list. That's more or less unavoidable from our perspective. In this case, for instance, and last time, we announced the schema change long in advance, and we can't maintain a list of every single library that's using our log list because they're not us, right? Like, it happens to be that this library is the most was the offender in these two cases, but it's not the only one. So we're taking steps to be more active in shaking Chrome free of these dependencies, because when this breakage happens, Google gets blamed, which sucks for me as someone who works for Google. But also, while I'm confident that we will always do the right thing when the security of the internet is at risk, so if we have to push a change to the log list urgently, we will do the right thing. But there's a whole bunch of sort of squishy bits where if you have a log list that, like, we have a change that needs to happen, but it doesn't really need to happen now, then suddenly a bunch of very important people at very big companies whose apps aren't working get on the phone and call my boss, and my boss's boss, and my boss's 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 boss, etc. And sooner or later, it gets very hard for us to do any of the changes that we need to make. So it's really important that we don't have those dependencies. So the very first thing we did was we published an acceptable use policy. This is great, not enough. For the library in particular, huge thank you to the folks in the community who made the case on the bug that maybe this particular library shouldn't be doing this. I also chimed in on that same bug saying, hey, please don't do this. I also actually, in this case, reached out to the person behind this library and said, hey, can we sponsor you to make things better? Unfortunately, that didn't work out. So now we're going to be looking to take a more active approach at shaking free of those dependencies. Starting next year, Android apps that use this library and other libraries like it, there are a couple in our set, will start receiving warnings when they try to publish updates in the Google Play Store. And the reason we're doing that is we're trying to say, hey, you really need to migrate off of this. We're also going to do direct outreach to some major apps. And then we're going to start breaking them again, except we're going to do it on our timeline instead of, accidentally when it happens. As I said, hundreds of thousands of requests per second. Legitimate requests for those endpoints is like 0.1 QPS maybe. That's probably quite high. So it's not hard to identify the unauthorized use cases of these endpoints. So yeah, my big recommendation here is if you're an Android app developer, please, please, please don't rely on third-party CT enforcement. I know there was a gap in CT enforcement opportunities there. Now it's fixed in Android. Use that going forward. If you're looking to develop a TLS client that wants to enforce CT, ask yourself if you can really commit to running a proper CT log program. If you can't and you want to rely on us, come talk to us. Don't just do it. There are ways to do this safely. And if you don't, we'll come and try to break you, which is not any fun for anyone. So that's all I got in my little lightning talk. Questions?
So question on the Play Store that where you would block some updates. Have you decided how that's going to be done? Like, is that actually looking at the code of the app itself, Are you going by user agents that you're seeing that are pulling the log lists? Just wondering how.
So we can't go by user agent directly for this purpose anyway, because most of the user agents are sort of generic, clearly coming from Android, which is a pretty good indication, but not a perfect one. Google maintains a great, like, creepy eye in the sky, don't tell anyone I said that, database of all the apps that are published in Play. Yeah, it's fine. It shouldn't be surprising to you that we can look at what apps are submitted to our app store. So we're going to go off of that. That's not a perfect data set, so we're going to do some additional analysis on top of that, but we'll do the best we can. There is an inherent risk that we will miss some apps, but that's just the fact of the matter. I can't fix that.
How are you planning to break these CT checking libraries?
Well, so a number of these libraries, as I said, have very strict schema enforcement. I can publish whatever I want at that URL. So, who knows? And we can also differentially serve different content based on things like user agent or other characteristics. So we have a couple of options that we're exploring. For the record, I'm not excited about breaking these apps. I take no joy in this. I just really, really, really want to make sure that when Chrome needs to be able to push an update to our log list, that we can do that without, escalations to my senior vice president from the CEO of some major corporation. Sort of deal.
So we currently have the V3 of this schema based on needing to evolve it. Have you considered going to a V4 and letting the V3 files rot in place?
That's kind of what the situation we're at for V2 right now. Is some of these apps are still using the V2 log list, and indeed, I haven't. It is on our to-do list to bring down the V2 log list, but I'm not keen to do that until I have an answer for all of the apps that are using the V3 URL, because I don't want all of these apps to just migrate and make my new problem bigger. That is an option. It's kind of a pain in the ass to keep bumping the URL around for all the legitimate consumers. And the last time we did that, all the apps just migrated. So it didn't solve our problem. It just kicked the can down the road until we have to do some other schema update. So yeah, it's an imperfect solution, but not a terrible one.
Thank you. Do you see a risk if more UAs and other consumers or apps that need a log list start making their own, and if there's more divergence, there might be other causes of breakage due to CA starting to use a new log list, it not being in certain log lists, then stuff breaks. So do we need some other kind of source of a consensus on which log lists are acceptable to use?
It is absolutely a risk to the ecosystem if we have a zillion different programs with subtly different lists. We already experience that right now with divergence between different UAs lists. I know that we in Chrome pay a lot of attention to what those other UAs are doing, and it's important to us that, for instance, we never do anything that would make it impossible to satisfy Chrome and Apple's policies. That would be bad. I'm actually a big fan when folks sit downstream of our list, as long as they're doing it safely, because it helps avoid this problem. But yeah, I think some level of coordination is essential if you're going to run, if you're going to be an active participant in this ecosystem. Yeah.
Thanks. Just a quick idea. I've noticed Let's Encrypt in their Acme directory objects using a technique where they're just adding some randomly generated JSON objects, so that if you're enforcing the JSON schema strictly, well, you're going to know about it pretty quick. Have you considered doing anything like that?
So we have, and I think it's much easier to do. Well, as soon as we do anything that starts causing breakage, it's we're going to hear about it, and so we need to be quite careful when we do that. And so our expectation is it's going to be a manual process for this foreseeable future. Once we've sort of shaken loose what we can, I think adding some sort of automatically generated noise or similar is not a terrible strategy, which we might explore once we're there. But that's sort of further down the road than I can see right now.
Have you considered a captcha?
A CAPTCHA. So actually, you will hit a CAPTCHA if you hit it enough times from the same IP, but there's a very distributed denial of service attack on these endpoints because it's essentially one request per service. So joking aside, there are things we could do. We have talked about things like, okay, now you need an API key in order to access this log list. That sucks. So I'm not keen on that, but I'm going to do everything I can to shake free of the bad dependencies and keep things as open as possible. And then if that doesn't work, we can look at more aggressive approaches.
We'll make this one the last one, please.
Is there a easy, good way to do whatever Chrome is doing?
So the most important thing to do if you wanted to sit downstream of us is somebody has to be paying attention and monitoring the changes and making sure that every change, especially schema changes we make, but other changes too, are still safe for your users. And that requires a time commitment. Like you need to be following along on CT policy and that sort of thing, and that's sort of a drag. Otherwise, the big things we ask for are things like you should have a 70-day kill switch, which is built into all well-behaved CT enforcing clients right now, where if you don't get an update from your update service within that time frame, it won't enforce CT anymore, and you shouldn't be directly fetching the log list from us. You should be fetching it to your servers and then pushing it back out to your users, so that if you do detect a problem, you have some way of sending different data to your clients, so that you can see the train coming, but you can't do anything about it, right? Which is the situation that the library is in, for instance. So there's a bunch of little things like that, but it's not actually that hard to do. It just requires you running some infrastructure and staying actively engaged with it, and that's a lot to ask if you're one person with an open source library. Obviously, I'm frustrated at this situation. This library developer is operating in good faith and has worked hard to fill a niche in the community. So I'm not upset at them. I just this is the challenge of the CT ecosystem writ large.
Okay, so let's say thank you to Joe again. Thank you very much.